Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Pedersen, and today this will be Monday's Lunch and Learn. Give just a few minutes here for everyone to filter in, as I am also going to upgrade my local. So in just a minute. Okay, so it looks like our pre-submitted question, I guess, had been answered already. So please let me know what questions that you might have. Go ahead, Mariah. What do you got today?
Okay, we have transactions that come in batches.
Okay.
So we have an account number and a dollar amount that will come in at the same time. And I need to find a way to, within the batch and within the day, so across multiple batches, total how many transactions there are for a specific account.
Okay.
So account A comes in with a $2 transaction and account A comes in with a $5 transaction. I need to sum to 7. And then 20 minutes later, I might get another transaction and I need to add the new dollar amount to the previous dollar amount. Now, I know how to do that one by one, but it's the batch part that I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out. So
Okay.
what I'm thinking is we have a temporary case structure. I mean, it's not it's permanent, but all it has in it is the account number, the dollar amount, and the date that it came in.
Okay.
So right now it goes through one by one and says, look for account A and add this and add them all together.
Right.
Yeah. I kind of needed to do that, but if there were 2 transactions in the same batch, I needed to add those 2 together and then apply the same total to both.
What about like a for each in group step here? You could group, if you've got a list of these account objects or these objects, right, from your CSV, you could use a for each in group step, and then you could group it on account ID. And then if it would give you you'd get in the loop, the for each in group takes a list in and outputs a list but that list can be one or many items.
Okay.
But that would give you in the current list all of the records for a particular account ID would be in one loop. And then when you went back to that for each in group, I think it might be called for each in group chunking, maybe.
Okay.
I'm reinstalling my local here at the moment, so I probably need like 90 more seconds before I can open up the installer. But
no,
or open up
that's actually
portal.
way easier than all of the ways I was thinking of doing it.
Because then you could sum those. You'd have in a list with the account IDs, and you could sum. You'd get all of the records for an account ID, and then you'd have like the transaction amount or something,
right,
as like a decimal or an integer array, and you could pass that into a sum step, and that would give you the total transactions for that. It would give you all the sum of all transactions for that account in the current list, something like that.
Okay. So then what do I do? Well, I guess if I do it by date, it would still work. So if I say it came in today and, limit my group by that.
So you're fetching these things is your first step? Like, so you're saving them already to the database?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be that way. That's just how it's doing it now.
So you import the records, you save them to the database, and then you're going to get all the records for created today?
Correct.
And would you mark them completed at some point?
What do you mean?
Like after, like, so you have, let's say you processed records yesterday, you processed records today.
Yes, they
Which,
get marked complete in that
okay,
way.
so
Yes.
then, so that means that you could say like, give me all records whose, creation date or transaction date is less than or equal to current date time, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Where status just equals not processed or something. And that
Right.
gives you a list of all the transactions that you need to process.
Mhm.
Right? And then you pass that list into your for each and group step. Now you've got each account ID for today's transactions grouped. And you probably have a for each and group with a for each step inside of it. Now, what's our record count? Like, how many records are we doing here?
Okay. So do you mean how many records would there be that need to be summed in any one group?
Or like, how many records would you expect to process any given day?
Oh, like 100, 150. Not,
Oh, okay.
it's
Then
not going to
yeah,
tax the system in any way.
got you. Okay. Then yeah, then I would say it'd be something like no, can you see my screen? No,
Yes.
I got my thing squared away here. Just working today. Let's assume I have a data type here. Are you actually using a case data object for this?
It is. So there's two, it's for that Cash App. So there's a case entity that has, 75 data elements. And then since we weren't that familiar with decisions, it was our first project. The second one that just has the account ID, the transaction value, and the date is also a case entity. I know it doesn't need to be one, but it just is one, and it's working that way in production, so I don't see any reason to bother it.
Just to know, I wouldn't handle very large data volumes with that. If you're doing any kind of batch thing, I would like huge record count. I'd eschew the case data object for that, almost
Okay.
certainly, just to know. But like I created, so let's assume I've done this. I created this data structure here, right? Which I just called transaction something, transaction item. So I could fetch these, right? And I could say, I didn't add dates, but let's assume I have this a fetch here. And if I search for each, I could look for each in group. And probably what I would have is like, is a relationship here. So if we looked at a sum step here, so for each in group will pass in the transaction item list. This is my, then if we look at sum, the values could be, we instead of getting an entity, like an item, like we do out of a normal for each, if we look at for each in group, it outputs, we need to select field to group on. So we'll group by account ID here. It outputs each grouping, which is a list of the item. So in sum here, if I looked into each grouping, all transaction value, which is the integer property I created. Now I have here is get them all, get all the ones that are unprocessed from today, loop them and group them by account number. And then for the current group sum, and let's assume I needed to do some sort of like a update step.
Yes.
Right. I could find my transaction item and maybe do a selective update step into a for each. So you'd have something like this. So what would you for each? You'd be for eaching the each grouping. So you'd get a big list. The whole list comes into here, smaller list here. Now you're looping each individual one. And then so you could take the account ID from item. And then your transaction value, I think, would actually be the sum output. Something like that. And then this would scan through pull all the records from today, group them by account ID, sum the transactions for all the account IDs, loop through each record, and then set the transaction value equal to the account ID. This could, of course, just be a completely different data type if need be.
Right, and that's what it will be. Yeah, that's perfect. I think
Does that get you what you need, you think?
As long as all of these steps are available in 6.19, yes, it does.
Oh, for sure. None of these are new. None of these are new at all.
Okay, perfect. Then yes, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you bet. Wonderful. Okay, what other questions do we have today? And as always, you guys can type your question out if you'd like, or just hit the raise hand function and we'll take you off mute and you can just ask your question. And go ahead, Ashwari. Let me see. You can. What question do you got?
Yeah. Hi, Will. So I have a flow wherein I have a form. I have to run that flow. So I have some dynamic inputs for that flow,
Okay.
and I want to have that flow run through a URL. So
Okay.
what I did was that I went to integration details, view integration details, and then I have generated a URL. And as I hit the URL, I'm able to view the form. And as I submit it, I am able to see a message that the flow is completed, which is a default subdialog of decisions. So my question
Yes.
is there any way that we can prevent showing that subdialog?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. The thing you're going to need to add to your flow to control that, like if you want to if you want to show if you want to override that or show a custom message, is called an end form. If you add an end form to your flow, you'll be able to not have that message show up. You can have a custom message show like, thank you for submitting blah, 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 right? And then with like a close button that can close the tab, but doesn't always work perfectly for reasons that are tough to sort of go into here.
Can I have a little demo for it?
Yeah, of course. Just 2 seconds here.
Sure.
Right. So let's see here. Let's create a folder here. So let's create a flow. And in this flow, we'll put a regular form here. And I'll just put like a single text box here and a label, just so we have something to look at. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and connect to our end step. We'll save this. We'll configure our integration to allow user interface. And we'll click view and open up the integration details page. We'll look at our URL here. And if we call that, we should get our form maximized here. Let's actually change that just so it's there we go. And if we click submit, okay. If we click submit, we get this. This is the pop-up that you're wanting to avoid, correct?
Yeah.
So if we come in, and what we're going to do is go under designer entities, forms end, and we'll just pick or create one here. What we can do is pick or create an end form, create new. It'll give us the same form designer we're used to seeing here. I'll just put a label, right? Thank you for your submission. Now, if we save this and we come back and we run our flow again, here's our form. And then we can get thank you for your submission. And close is not always able to close the dialogue, but we can ignore. We could probably what we should do here is maybe delete the close button as it's not necessary. Something like you can close this tab at any time. The way an inform works is it redirects the user session. Yeah, so you get this, and you could, of course, then have some sort of just dialogue show, but the flow itself continues on. So in a normal world, in a normal form, like an in session form, the flow will wait for the user to complete. But in inform, any steps that happen after the inform, the flow does not pause and wait for user interaction with an inform. An inform is just a like informational or display artifact that you can show end users, and the flow will continue to process as expected. So these informs are what are the feature we have in place to help you control that sort of post submission user experience.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Good to know about this feature. I didn't. I'll use this. Thanks, Will. That's all I have.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to help. If you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry, let me allow you to talk there. What do you got for today, sir? What can we do for you?
I wasn't trying to. I raised my hand by accident. I just
okay.
joined because I learned so much from when you guys show things that I just joined without any specific.
No problem.
Today I have no questions.
No worries. Yeah. Looks like we've had a couple other people join. Any questions from anyone else that has recently joined? Here's a question from anonymous attendee. In decisions, is the data type long considered an int 64? Do we actually let you select long? I don't think so. I don't think that it is. We do have double, interestingly, but we don't have long. I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen. I mean, N64, of course, you can hold pretty significant numbers there, but I mean, honestly, when we see people do, most of the data types we see are just going to be 32-bit ints, possibly 64. We very rarely see anyone use unsigned ints. We see lots of decimals, of course, but less commonly we see doubles or longs. So I do not think I can't find a data type of long in my local. I don't. So I'm not entirely sure what the anonymous question asker here is asking, but you can select if you need a significantly sized integer value, then you can use int 64. That gives you an impressively large number to calculate. What we normally see is just decimals or int 32s for most of the work that we see customers building. We don't see too many use cases involving like floating point calculation type processes in the application. Not that you can't do it, it's just not common. Any other questions about that? I mean, I'm not really answering your question well, but. Anything else we have for today? What we should do is just go into the forum. See, pass data from repeater to main form. I have a main form and inside it is an embedded data repeater. I want to get data from the data repeater and pass it into the main form. For example, a certain field in the first row. How can I achieve this? I tried the same thing with passing data from the main form to data repeater, but it did not work. So let's go see if we have an example project for this. Oh, it's about data repeater. We have this. Search for repeater. Dynamic data repeater contents. in a data repeater? Autofill, use sub dialog, using a data repeater. Using a data flow on a data repeater. This will work. I think this will work okay. Let's answer our friend here. Alex got a question about improvements to forms. The big improvement in forms is just the continuing evolution of our simple form designer here. Now in 8, you can build repeaters. So simple forms are a parallel approach to form design that we've been adding that are more native mobile and do more work for you. It's kind of a parallel type, like we just call it list and do it select. Playfield type. Oh. You see this looking a lot more sort of like React Native. But really, the main changes for 8, specific to 8, is that we've added these simple forms in as a alternative design. They're technically 2 types. They both, at the end of the day, are decisions forms, but you can't convert between the 2. And we are kind of developing these normal forms or regular forms and these simple forms in parallel. So what you can get is a nicer looking form with less sort of design work. So if I were to create a flow here and put our simple form here, simple form 1. If we put some accounts into our accounts list, Then some values in for the drop-down list, and I'll ignore the selected item. In text box 1, I'll ignore. So if I debug this now, I get this. That data grid looks odd. It's closer. The idea is less control, but something more close, more easier to build, something more similar to like a Google form. Less control. At the end of the day, the rendering would be more similar to like a Google form, but you retain the ability to embed these in flows and then pass data to and from them as you would a standard decisions form. So that's the real, but that's simple forms we're evolving through 7, and we're just continuing to evolve those through version 8. As it relates to forms themselves, there's no new changes. In V7, we did a lot of work to rewrite our form rendering so that we to remove as much rendering from the server as possible. There is still a little bit of rendering that occurs when a user loads a form. Yeah, absolutely. It's more of a material look. That's correct. And so there are big changes to form rendering efficiencies in V7 that were newer, but those changes are of course in 8, but there's been no form specific enhancements to V8 outside of the continuing evolution of these simple forms we were just talking about here. We've had a couple new members join the webinar. Anybody have any questions? Any new questions? As always, you can ask in Q&A, type it out in the chat, or just use the raise hand feature and we'll unmute you and let you ask. Where is the easiest for you to do?
Hi, Will. This is Aishwarya again.
Yeah.
I have another question.
What you
So
got?
I have a report where I have a column with date and time. So the format that is by default present in decisions is MDYYYY, or else if there is a single digit date and single digit month, so we will show MDYY. And then if there's a double digit year and month, so I'll take an example. So if it is 3rd April today, so we show 3 and 4 and then YYY. And then if there is a date with October 20th, so we then add a double digit to it, and then we show 20 and then we show 10. So I
Okay.
wanted to know that for single digit date and month, is there any way we can add padding in the reports directly?
In add padding into the report, like into the individual cell?
Yeah, in a column. I want to have that padding. So because I want to have this consistent date time format, MMDDYY. So I'm trying to achieve that.
Okay, here's a report. So here's a report of accounts, and on the created date, if I scroll down, I have format options. I can specify format options here. So like I can also do other. If I do other, it'll give me a format. So if I look at .NET date format, is it M capital? I always forget. Capital M, lowercase y. The
I
minute.
guess the format is case insensitive in our case, so anything should do. Small or small dd.
Year.
Oh,
Is this
okay.
not what? Maybe it's not YY. Maybe it's go. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, this is what I wanted to.
Is this what you wanted? Yeah, and I guess you can. I didn't actually realize that it just replaces the characters, so you can actually play around with this in all sorts of neat ways that I didn't realize till right now. Cool.
Yeah.
I just thought it just overrode the whole text string, but obviously it does like interpolation for you. But yeah, so if you select other, you've got a bunch of default options here. In fact, probably like year and month just gives you like the month name and then the full year. But if you
So-
want something more custom, you can just use normal like .NET date format strings to do that.
Yeah, so you have clicked on the column, right? And
Yes,
then
correct.
that is where.
Yeah, correct. Like if you're in this, it's not going to be, if you click anywhere in the header field, you're just going to be on the default settings. You click onto the column here. It doesn't select if you do it on the actual review. You have to select it in data fields. And then you'll see the data source field created on date. You can swap, you can see that change as we click between email address and created on date here. But yes, it is a column level setting, and you scroll down. And if it is a date time, one of the options under formatting would be format, which would be set to, short date and time by default.
Mhm. Yeah, I got my answer. Thanks for that, Will.
Okay, you bet. Okay, we're getting sort of 40 minutes in. Anybody else have any questions for us this afternoon?
Just another follow-up question to the date format that I had asked you earlier.
Mhm.
So in case if we have a field with date and time as its data type, so if user chooses to select any date and month, so there also, is there any way that we can format in a form?
Format the date.
Yeah, in a data type.
Like what type of control, or like a date time picker?
It's a date picker, that's all.
Let's see. Just date picker. I turn off. Well, turn off all suggestions. Override date format. See what this does. It's my form from flow 1. Oh, there you go. Cool.
Sure.
Good
Thanks
to
for
know.
that as well.
Hey, you're making me learn all sorts of things here. Awesome. No, yeah. So again, just to show you what I did there on the form. Now I don't know how long we've had this for. I don't spend much of my day making forms that much anymore. But if I'm on it, I selected on a date picker, override date format, and then I just used again the custom date time format strings that we can find on Microsoft's site, which is what we're using to let you to manage to set the date time format of your thing.
Sure. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, thanks for the questions. More the merrier. All right, Alex. If I want to use a data widget in a form that is more flexible than the current picker, how do I do that? Specifically, I want the picker to gray out dates that follow some rule. The date needs to be between two calculated dates. I don't know if you can do this now. Okay. So you're imagining some kind of calendar control pop up, I guess, Alex, that shows when I click a date, it starts graying dates I'm not able to select out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure you if you have a JavaScript library, this sounds like a JS control. We don't have a control like this today, and you can't pass validation at that level of control. Like you could say this date is bad, but like on the actual like date picker pop up, you can't say you can't apply validations to the pop-up itself and like gray out particular dates in the way that you're asking.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you can say no later, dates in the future or dates in the past can be invalid, but typically the problem is with those forms that require something very specific, right? Now, no more than 10 business days from today, or whatever. So I know that there are ways of doing that. I don't know which widget to use, external JavaScript widget. And even if I did, and this might be long for today, but it would be great to see how to incorporate it, in a form, right? I know that there are ways of incorporating JavaScript widgets, but I don't know how to do it. Actually, I can barely spell JavaScript, so
that makes two of us. Yeah, we do have the JS control. I'd be happy to walk through that. Let's just go like we've got some simple examples. Like we've built a couple of these, like creating JavaScript form controls. Really, there's usually just a little bit of JavaScript, and then you just kind of, once you have it built, you just deal with it like a, what I would say is this, if this is a big need for you and you need this is likely something that that you could get like a rent-a-coder on like Fiverr or someone to build for you, just using this documentation. And then they could give you back effectively this JavaScript file. You probably need to give them temporary access to your server or have them download a free trial to actually test it out. But there's nothing proprietary about the JS that we're constructing here. And the documentation walks them through. There's just a few like classes that they have to instantiate and then bind to, but they should know how to do that. But really you get, at the end of the day, just a widget that you could, you deal with like a normal form control. So this one, like Java, this is the form control advanced. What is this one? Yeah, this one has a button that increments a counter. It's kind of silly from an actual use case perspective. There you go. Yeah, it's incrementing a number. Maybe not the most helpful example. We've done this to make like custom file viewer controls for users, or our customers have, or special like payment controls where you get like a credit card payment transaction, something that the company has an actual dedicated like JavaScript library to support. That's very straightforward, embedding that, like enter in your credit card information and it'll post a transaction automatically, type stuff. But if you needed that's the particular UI you're asking for, you are going to be in a place where you're going to need JavaScript control development to be done, because we don't currently support anything like that.
Yeah. The thing is whether there is documentation that says how to incorporate a JavaScript widget into a form. I know that when you are painting the form using the designer, the form designer, there is an option for JavaScript stuff, right? I can't remember what it's called, but in order for that JavaScript stuff to be even visible, forget about working, there's probably something that needs to be done ahead of time.
Correct. And, yeah, you have to make one of these JS controls, and that's what like this document is an example of creating a JavaScript form control. Once you have that, you just drag it onto the grid or to the canvas like any other control.
Okay, so I have to read the manual.
Yeah, this is the place in the documentation where you would start for that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, sorry, I think I muted you, Alex, if you're about to ask another question.
No, I was saying I have to run now, so thank you for this. I always learn something new from you guys. Thanks.
You bet. Happy to help, sir. All right, anybody else got any questions for us today? Looks like we've had a few people join somewhat late, so let us know if there's anything you guys like. Yeah. Okay. If that's everything for today, then I appreciate everyone's attendance and questions. I will be here again tomorrow, and then we'll have a few other people taking over. It looks like we'll have the product manager Eric Wilmerink on Wednesday, and we'll have one of our sales engineering team members, Kevin Harvey, on Thursday. Appreciate everyone's time. Talk to you tomorrow, and have a great afternoon.